Good, thank you. Well, welcome along to this, the final session of the day here on the Built Environment Forum. As you may be aware, if you've been here at other sessions, I'm Andy Cameron-Smith, Editorial Director at Unlock Net Zero. So thanks very much for joining us. As I say, the final session of the day, but it is a very good one. And we are going to be looking at a sometimes overlooked subject in the journey to net zero, and that's all about the management of our water resources. So to talk to us about this, I'm delighted to introduce Scott Kingsbury from WINT Water Intelligence, who's going to do a short presentation for us about the importance of our management of water. So Scott, over to you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for sticking by at such a late hour. So yeah, I'm stopping your beers at the minute. So yeah, thank you very much. As you can see, obviously, I'm going to be talking about water sustainability and understanding the measurable ESG impact. So just a little bit about me. I'm country manager for WINT, lead the UK, been in construction, facility management, property for multiple years, most recently around digital twins, and basically helping companies around sustainability, mitigating risks and solutions for the built world. A little bit about WINT before we go into it. We're a water management solution, which effectively we serve the construction industry, residential, commercial, and effectively we're here to prevent water damage, and that's probably just reiterating that's water going into buildings. It's not obviously looking at sewage or anything like that. It's the water infrastructure in buildings, water saving, sustainability, and then eliminating business disruption. So let's get started. As you can see here, we have a huge problem with water, which ultimately we believe needs addressing, and there's four main problems that we want to talk about that obviously we're looking at and seeing with WINT, and obviously I'll go into those, and then basically what I'll do afterwards as well, we'll go into a little bit around our solution and how it works to address obviously some of these problems. Now, the first problem, as you can see, the world is drying up, and these pictures aren't really a pretty sight, right? Water is becoming a scarce resource, and we're basically on a path, as it says here, of drying out. And effectively, I don't think there's enough focus on us. We need to be more careful in this space, but this is what it looks like. And then ultimately, as you can see here, some more picture proof across the globe in the differences in such a short period of time in, say, the Colorado River in the US, River Po in Italy, obviously in China, just the short difference in ultimately what's happening across the globe in water. Now, I'm just going to put up the next slide for you that is quite impactful for only recently joining WINT, is 25% of water going into buildings is going to waste. So when we look at that, a quarter of water going into buildings is effectively just going to waste. And we're not, obviously, when we look at water management solutions, that's what we're here to effectively address. Now, that is a number of things when we look at the customers that we are working with around poor use, leaky infrastructure, obviously neglect of repairing, obviously such small fractures in pipes. So it's a big thing, like when you look at it, a quarter of water. Now, the biggest thing for us then, and obviously coincides with being here, is the impact then that has on emissions that effectively, potentially we're not looking at enough. So water resource is not the only problem. So when you look at a steady water supply to sites, which involves pumping, treating, delivery and treatment of sewage, it's a hugely intensive resource process, which basically results in massive amounts of carbon being used. So when you look at the graph on the right-hand side, on average, we look at it that 1 cubic metre of water basically generates around, on average, 10.6 kilos of carbon. And then when you look at the stats, the people that might be at the back that can't see, obviously the smaller writing is one continuously running toilet there has the same carbon footprint as the annual emissions of a passenger car. So there's multiple times where we've gone in to see offices and I see a stuck toilet or a urinal constantly flowing. That's just constantly wasting around 300 litres an hour of water. So 300 litres an hour of water is just being wasted by a stuck toilet, just continuously flowing. And that has a huge impact, not only obviously water going to waste, but the emissions that's being generated to get that water to site. Now, the other thing as well is electricity. So this stat here is, that's better. This stat here is the amount of electricity in the US that is used for water delivery and treatment. So just to put that into context, and I literally saw this stat last week, 2 billion aircon units in the world account for 10% of electricity. So when we put that into context then against this number, it's quite obviously scary. So if we mix that in with 25% is going to waste into buildings, basically we're increasing carbon emissions to produce a scarce resource that basically is resulting in being wasted, which is quite a scary thing. Now, the fourth problem, which may not be so relevant in this room though, is for insurers, water is becoming the new fire. So in construction sites, obviously across operational buildings, claims are going up, insurers are stepping away from covering liability, or we're seeing deductibles are rising significantly. So there's a huge impact on costs on the insurance side and obviously risk. So effectively, in summary then for these problems is the world is drying up, we're on the path of drying up, then mix that in with a quarter of water in buildings is going to waste, which then we produce in loads of carbon emissions, producing that water that potentially is going to waste and carbon in general that we don't relate. We look at electricity, it's really simple. And then there's huge pain on insurance companies at the same time because there's damage that's happening and water being the new fire. So those are the problems, and effectively, hopefully after the next slide we can go into a little bit around what WINT looks like and what that does to address some of those problems as well. Now, before we do that, this is just a little bit of a study we did on a building, so LEED Gold facility, which should be a top sustainable building that's been built. And effectively we've gone in after completion and we've implemented WINT. And as you can see there is we've reduced the consumption down by 4 to 6% because of lots of various wastes of water that's happened on main pipes, toilets, misconfigured irrigation, osmosis, kitchen, showers. So I think we've got these problems, we're trying to address them, and then obviously there's also buildings that are being built and assets that are being built that actually we need to look at afterwards as well, make sure we've got correct infrastructure that's not just relevant for WINT, but other technology that's going to actually measure that building after it's been built to make sure that it's achieving those goals. So let me just go on a little bit about WINT then. So first of all, our solution isn't just a one system that you put on the mains feed and it covers the whole building. What you've got here is, as you can see, imagine that's a 4-story building, and we work off standard off-the-shelves valve and meters. So effectively, you say you've got a 4-story building and you're going to put one of the WINT solutions, which is an IoT device that sits on top of the meter and valve, and it's going to measure each floor, for example. So what happens then is we've got flexible comms, so we can work over cellular, we can work over Wi-Fi, we can work over Ethernet, and we've got a control unit, and all it's doing is it's measuring the flow of that water going into that, across that building and across that infrastructure. Now, as you can see, and we'll go into some pretty graphs on the next slide, is our AI and our algorithms is effectively painting these graphs to understand what's going on with that water. And our AI and algorithms, far over my head, obviously more technical than I am, can really start to understand the different types of abnormalities that are happening to stuck toilets, or actually a toilet flush that is correct, etc. Then, as you can see on the left-hand side, is when we do detect abnormal behaviour, we have an app on the mobile phone where you can literally shut off that valve by your phone, and obviously if it's a pipe burst, you shut it off instantly and it shuts off, say, floor 4, that it's got a problem, let's shut it off. In the background though, we've got lots of KPIs, reports and analytics that's providing you information about water consumption, carbon emissions savings, so all of that stuff that can play into your ESG reporting and really help understand what's going in your building around water. We can plug into building management systems and all stuff like that. So let me show you then what our pretty graphs look like. So as you can see here, this is what a toilet flush looks like on the top graph. So obviously it's at 0. Somebody flushes the toilet, you can see the spike where we have the initial obviously water flow, fills the basin back up and then back down to 0. You've then got a toilet flush with a hand wash. So obviously we flush the toilet, it spikes, then they have a hand wash afterwards, goes back, fills the bowl up, and then goes down to zero. And then just to show, obviously, we can go on such complex things as cooling towers, HVAC systems, all stuff like that. Obviously, we've got washing machines, etc. So effectively, all our AI is doing is not as simple as that, because multiple toilets can flush and all stuff like that. It's basically going, what does normal look like and what does abnormal look like, to really, really understand your water management in your building. So let's look at something that doesn't look so good. So as we can see here in the bottom graph here around a sustainability play, is you've got a toilet flush and it goes up and then somebody washes their hands, but it's a stuck toilet. So effectively then it's flowing, that one's flowing at around 300 litres, 350 litres an hour. As you can see, it's just constantly flowing water. So that's when we'll send an alert, you'll get detected, you'll really understand what's going on. You can either stop the flow of the water and shut off that area, or you can go, do you know what, let's go and get somebody and go and attend that because there's a problem in this area of our building. And that's when then it plays into the carbon emission savings. Obviously, you're reducing your water consumption because that'll just be going round. Then, as you can see in the top right graph, obviously a worse graph, if we want to say, is that's a pipe break. That's a really, really serious breaking of pipe. And obviously it breaks, small fracture, and then as you can see, the fracture gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it goes up to about 750 litres an hour. If that's on a 20th floor, obviously the amount of damage that it can cause. So that's ultimately the way that we're helping people, reducing waste, water, and reducing carbon, and effectively as well, reducing damages and preventing business disruption across buildings. And that's obviously, you've got the AIs that look nice, and that should what it look like, and then you've got the AIs that go, that's not right, we need to do something about it. Just obviously a couple more slides before I go, just swiftly over a couple of case studies for you, is obviously our management platform and tools. You've got the app, you've got water consumption data, you've got carbon emission data and all of that stuff. So everybody that's looking at it is you can start to pull out those reports. You can start to really report on in your ESG. So a lot of our customers are reporting on obviously in ESG and involving those in reporting and being able to work out the carbon they're saving, etc., etc. Obviously your real-time alerts and everything can come in the app as well. Hundreds of customers. I don't want to obviously go too much on that, but that, again, that's just some of the customers that we're working with. Key, obviously GCs, enterprise customers that we're just trying to help mitigate obviously water and understand water across their buildings. Now, just quickly then before I wrap up and go over a couple of case studies. So as you can see here, giving the name away now from an earlier slide of the lead gold facility, as you can see, they had a challenge, right? They wanted to ensure they were sustainable, cut carbon emissions, reduce water waste, and basically the key as well is eliminate water damage. They had a sensitive area of their site. So as you can see, obviously not going over it, we went over it earlier, is the waste that we detected in 12 months across obviously gallons of water across these areas. And then the success metrics, over 8 million gallons saved, consumption obviously reduced. Annual carbon emissions was a huge saving and a huge benefit for them, which was huge in the sustainability space. And then operational was kind of a byproduct. So I think that's probably key as well, is you can implement this solution in different ways of what you're trying to achieve as a business. And ultimately they've multiple leaks were prevented, saving hundreds of thousands of pounds and preventing that disruption. And then the Empire State Building, which is more of a great one for us, is one of the first buildings, obviously very, very large and big building, and yeah, they had some key metrics in reducing water year over year, water consumption, obviously carbon neutrality. Obviously there's a lot of net zero goals out there at the minute. I think water is one of those ones where obviously it's easy to focus in electricity and other, actually where does water fall into that? They wanted to prevent water leak damage and disruption, especially to that building. Now, what we actually did is we did detect a cooling tower malfunction that could have gone unnoticed, and effectively a pump failed as well. That pump was on a very, very high floor and could have pumped a lot of water out, and obviously went down there. So without again reading out the success metrics in there, obviously everyone can see that for yourself. And just a couple of examples more in the sustainability play of where we fit and obviously what problems we're trying to address and what that looks like. So I think just to wrap up, and again, appreciate everybody staying a little bit later. It's nearly bird time, or obviously home time for everybody, so I appreciate you sticking around. Is, like I said, we have a problem. We have 4 problems. water is becoming a scarce resource. There's huge impact on carbon emissions. There's a huge impact on infrastructure, and obviously our infrastructure across the UK, but not only globally. Insurance is rising, and basically we want to fix it, right? And we're on the path to fixing it and path to help businesses achieve the goals across water. And thank you very much for sticking around, and we've got a stand over there, so if you want to ask any questions or ask any questions afterwards, feel free, and we're around. But really appreciate everybody sticking by, and yeah, thank you.
So,